They told me there wasn't space for me at Thanksgiving after I'd paid for the furnace that kept their house warm. My name is Oliver, 54. I quietly funded their comfort while burying my own loneliness beneath the hum of the heating system and the weight of responsibility. Ever stared at a bill, one that promised security but didn't cover you? I thought I had done the right thing when I fixed their furnace, without asking. Should have known that meant I'd be the one left out in the cold. The voicemail flashed on my phone screen at 7:12 a.m., right after I'd completed my morning routine, steeping tea, feeding the cat, boots by the door. I recognized my mom's voice before I even pressed play, polite, clipped, but with that nervous edge like she'd rehearsed what to say. "Hi, Ollie. It's Mom. The leak's back. The contractor says it's urgent. He's here now. Just thought I'd let you know. Alright, bye." It wasn't a question. It never was. The first snow of the season was coming, just enough to dust the porch rails and remind me that a real storm was on the horizon. From my kitchen window, I could see the top of their house 3 blocks away, the roof shingles peeling, weathered from the spring storm I'd patched up. I stood alone on a rusty ladder, the smell of turkey filling the air, the sounds of laughter spilling out from inside. No one came out to thank me. I zipped my jacket up tight and walked the 3 blocks over, hands deep in my coat pockets, hearing every leaf crunch underfoot like it was a step closer to a place I wasn't welcome. When I knocked, Carol barely looked up from the couch. "He's outside," she said, her eyes glued to the TV, though it was muted. The contractor, Jason, was waiting, clipboard in hand, like a bad news messenger. He shook my hand firmly. "We're looking at $9,000, he said, running his hand along the roof's edge. "The leak's gotten under the flashing. If we don't address it, we're talking about rot and mold. You leave it too long, the damage could spread." Carol and Arthur stood quietly behind me. Arthur cleared his throat once, then dropped it. No words. Jason handed me the estimate. "I can schedule it for Tuesday, we just had a cancellation." I sighed and glanced back at Carol. No one reached for their wallets. No one asked for my help. But no one had to. "I'll take care of it," I said. My voice sounded casual, but inside, the weight of the words felt heavier than any roof repair. It was the same tone I'd used for years to smooth things over, like talking about picking up napkins for a family gathering. Carol smiled faintly, a practiced kindness. "You always come through." 20 minutes later, with the estimate still folded in my coat pocket, I walked back to my apartment. The kitchen still smelled like cinnamon from the tea that had gone cold. I sat down at my desk, opened the folder titled "Family Expenses Never Mentioned," and added a new entry. Date, October 17, 2023. Description, roof repair, parents' house. Amount, $9,000. Transferring the funds was easy, 5 clicks, 1 bank confirmation, and it was gone. I didn't think about the number, not really. I thought about the warmth that roof would hold. The dryness where people I loved would sleep. It felt like what sons do, or maybe what I'd always done. The week passed without a thank you, but that wasn't anything new. I worked, came home, and watched the leaves crisp under the frost. Then, on Sunday evening, my phone buzzed again. I was halfway through trimming a dying basil plant when I saw my mom's name on the screen. "Hi, Ollie," she said. "How's the roof holding up?" "Oh, yes," she replied quickly, "Jason did a lovely job. It looks so neat from the street." I waited, but she hesitated. "Thanksgiving's going to be a little smaller this year," she said, dragging out "smaller" like it would make the truth easier to swallow. I sat down on the couch, basil shears still in hand, a laugh almost escaping me. Not because it was funny, but because it felt rehearsed. "You mean, I'm not invited?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She jumped in quickly, overly cheerful now. "Well, it'll just be the immediate family. You know how loud the twins can get. Arthur hasn't been sleeping well. We thought it might be easier if we kept it quiet this year. I stared at the basil leaves in my hand, crushed slightly from my tightening grip. The words felt flat, like a line from a bad sitcom. She cut in before I could respond, almost too bright. Anyway, we'll drop off some leftovers on Friday. You could pick them up if you're around. We'll leave them on the porch so no one has to coordinate schedules. I don't remember saying goodbye. Maybe I did, but it didn't matter. I sat for a while, staring at the leaves, then glanced at the receipt from the contractor still pinned to the fridge with the same magnet that held up a photo of me and Dad fishing. Paid in full. Roof protection plan, 10 years. I stared at those words, rereading them 3 times, half expecting them to change if I blinked. 10 years, that roof would outlast every Sunday dinner, every unopened birthday card, and every voicemail that tried too hard to sound casual. I muttered to myself with a half smile, wish I had one of those. Then I opened the fridge, poured myself a glass of iced tea, and stood there in the dim kitchen light, letting the silence settle over me like snowfall. They told me the house was full. I was the one who had filled it. The cafe on Main Street still smelled of nutmeg and sugar, but the scent did little to lift my spirits. I sat in my usual corner booth, the place I'd claimed years ago for quiet weekend crosswords. The pumpkin muffin on my plate sat untouched, its paper wrapper peeled halfway back, like I had intended to eat it but found something, or maybe nothing, more pressing. Outside, 2 little girls in puffy coats chased leaves down the sidewalk. One tripped, then burst out laughing, her arms flailing like she was trying to fly. My phone buzzed on the table. I let it ring once, twice, then swiped to check the voicemail. "Hey, Ollie," Dad's voice came through, as unbothered as ever. "Just wanted to check in, no big deal. You know how it goes with Thanksgiving. Mandy's little ones can turn it into a circus. We're keeping it tight this year, just the immediate family. Hope you're good." The call ended without any hint of a question, and I stared at my reflection in the window for a long moment. My face was older around the eyes than I remembered, and my shoulders curved forward like they were trying to protect something heavy inside my chest. Out of habit, I opened my phone's expense sheet. $2,100 for the furnace. $3,800 for Mandy's baby shower venue. $9,000 for the roof. I didn't even need to look at the numbers. They had disappeared from my account with the same silence that greeted them on the other side. I scrolled a bit more. There it was. Total, $14,900. The barista walked past with a tray of pies, a warm smile on her face. "Here for your usual Thanksgiving order, Ollie. Same apple crumb like last year?" It took me a moment to respond, too long, in fact. "No, not this year," I said, the words feeling unfamiliar in my mouth. She nodded, sensing something was off, and moved on without pressing. I slid out of the booth, my coffee still full, the muffin untouched. I left the cafe and walked home, the cold hitting me as soon as I stepped outside. The door to my apartment creaked when I opened it, just like always. Inside, everything was still, as though nothing had changed. I took off my boots and sat at my desk, the silence almost comforting. My laptop was still open. There it was again, homeowner's insurance policy #VT7742389. I paused when I saw the address, 123 Oakwood Lane. Not my address. Their address. Somewhere between paying for the furnace and covering the deductible for that burst pipe in 2021, the policy had quietly slipped under my name, a favor I'd never asked for, but one I'd never thought to change. I hovered over the "Cancel Policy" button. A red confirmation message blinked up, "Are you sure?" Was I? I closed the laptop without pressing it. Not yet. I stood up and walked over to the fridge. The contractor's receipt was still pinned there, beneath the photo of Dad and me, fishing at Lake Elmore. A moment from the past that felt like someone else's life. The words on the receipt still stared back at me, paid in full, roof protection plan, 10 years. I stared at the bold blue ink, feeling a little older, a little heavier. I muttered, half smiling, I wish I had one of those, before opening the fridge and pulling out the iced tea. I poured a glass, letting the cold hit the back of my throat. I stood there in the dim kitchen light, letting the silence settle over me. They said their house was full. But it was me who filled it. The first snowstorm came like a reluctant apology, soft and hesitant at first, but by noon, it had melted into slush, a reminder that even the gentlest things don't last. I watched from my window as the streets turned white, the world outside muffled under the snow's quiet weight. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up. It was Carol. The call was brief. The heater's making a noise again. It sounds like it's breathing. Can you come by? I didn't answer right away. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, unsure of the words. Then, I typed it anyway, I can't. I deleted it just as quickly. Left it unanswered, as I had done with so many things. The snow outside pressed against the windows, the wind picking up in gusts. It was late in the evening when I pulled up the family expense sheet once more. The numbers were just numbers now, and the silence that surrounded them didn't seem so loud anymore. There was a calmness to it. A choice, perhaps, to stop waiting for things to change. I went outside to get firewood, wrapping the scarf Nora had knit around my neck. I didn't have to think about it. Her kindness had woven itself into me, just like the warmth of the scarf that kept me from the cold. I came back to the apartment and sat down. The heat from the small ceramic heater hummed behind me, the scent of cinnamon still lingering in the air. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, there was peace, quiet and steady. There was a knock at the door. I opened it to find nothing but a small package wrapped in brown paper with a note attached. For when silence gets too loud. I opened it carefully. Inside was another gift, a hand-knitted scarf, this one in a deep navy with thin copper threads running through it. A warmth that had taken hours to make, a kindness sewn into every stitch. I wrapped it around my neck and stood there in the doorway, the silence of the world outside pressing against the window like an exhale. Sometimes, peace doesn't come from big gestures or apologies. It comes from choosing to stop carrying what was never yours to bear. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of peace we find when we let go of what others think we owe them and start living in the space we create for ourselves. The next morning, Christmas Eve, wrapped the town of Oakwood in a soft, quiet snow. It settled on rooftops and parking lots like powdered sugar on an old recipe card. I walked home through the flurries, feeling lighter somehow. The scarf from Nora still wrapped around my neck, the weight of kindness a comforting weight on my shoulders. Inside my apartment, it was different. The space had transformed, softened. A small tree sat in the corner, wrapped in twine. One lone gift sat beneath it, my gift to myself, carefully wrapped with imperfect edges. A candle flickered beside it, casting a steady light. At 6:02 p.m., there were no calls, no cards. No message from Carol or Arthur. Not even from Mandy. The night drew on quietly, as the flicker of the candle lighted up the room with its soft, steady glow. My thoughts were distant, each one like a snowflake drifting down gently, settling into the quiet corners of my mind. There was something peaceful in the stillness of this space that I had created, something untouched by expectations, by the weight of years spent trying to fit into places I no longer needed to be. The soft knock at the door came unexpectedly, though in a way, I had been expecting it. When I opened the door, I found Nora standing there, her cheeks rosy from the cold, carrying a thermos and two mismatched mugs tucked under her arm in a hand-knit carrier. She smiled at me, her warmth radiating out, filling the space where silence had been. "You still up for cider?" she asked, her voice light, like the question didn't really matter as much as the fact that she had asked. I stepped aside, surprised by how much I needed it, though I hadn't known until that moment. Of course, I replied, my voice a little softer than I'd expected. We sat there, in silence at first, each sipping slowly. The heat from the cider drifted into the air, mingling with the faint notes of Ella Fitzgerald playing softly on the radio. There were no words of sympathy, no obligatory holiday conversation, just the quiet companionship of someone who understood the kind of silence that was comforting, not painful. Nora set the mugs down on coasters I hadn't used in years, the ones I had kept for occasions like this, those little reminders that even the smallest acts of kindness could fill the spaces between the bigger moments. She glanced around, her eyes pausing on the firewood stacked neatly beside the door. "You've made it home," she said, her voice quiet and knowing. I smiled at her words, realizing how true they were. I hadn't lived in this place, not really, until now. It was in the small, everyday acts that I had finally built something that felt like home. Nora reached into her bag and pulled out a flat package, placing it gently on the coffee table. "Don't open it yet," she said with a smile. "Or do, I don't mind." I carefully opened it. Inside was a small watercolor painting of my parents' house, the roof bathed in warm orange winter light. Smoke curled from the chimney, but there were no people, no cars, just the stillness of a place that had once been filled with everything I thought I needed. It wasn't the house I remembered, but the one I had let go of. Nora's voice softened. "You lived there once. But you don't live there now." I placed the painting gently on the shelf beside the scarf she had given me, the same way you set something down after realizing it no longer belonged to you. We talked a little more, about books, about the scent of real pine versus artificial. Nora shared a poem she liked where snow wasn't really snow but a metaphor for memory. I didn't say much in return, but that was enough. Later that night, after Nora left, I sat by the window with the last of the cider in my hand. The warmth from the mug seeped into my skin, but it was the stillness outside that anchored me. The world was covered in a blanket of snow, soft, unmoving. And I thought about the Thanksgivings of years past, how, as a child, I had never once been asked what I wished for when we broke the wishbone. It felt like no one had ever asked, perhaps not ever, but especially not then. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the light from the tree and the candle filling the space. This was the kind of peace I had needed all along, not a reunion, not an apology, but the release from waiting for others to change. The year had come full circle, and with it, I had found something I never expected. Peace didn't come from reconciling with my past, it came from accepting it and choosing not to carry its weight anymore. A few days later, a small letter arrived. Pale blue, postmarked the day after Thanksgiving. The handwriting on the front was uneven, shaky, different from the neat Christmas cards Carol used to send. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I set the firewood down by the hearth, sliced 2 apples into a simmering pot of cider, and took a call from Haley. "Mom's home from the hospital," Haley said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of things unsaid. "They're staying with Aunt Joan for now. Mandy left again, back to North Carolina, I think." I stirred the cider slowly, listening to Haley. "Your dad sold his watch set for heating oil," she added, and the words landed heavier than I expected, sinking into me like cold water. "Thanks for the update," I said, my voice steady but not without its own quiet ache. After we hung up, I turned my attention to the letter, finally opening it carefully, as if not to disturb the fragile peace it might hold. Inside, the paper smelled faintly of lemon soap and dust, and Carol's handwriting leaned to the right, like it was trying to stay upright. She'd crossed out more words than she had left. "Ollie, I don't expect you to answer. I wouldn't, if I were you. I don't know why we made you feel like a guest in your own history. Maybe because you never asked to be the center." The roof held. I should have said thank you, but mostly, I finally understand what silence costs. I hope you're warm. Mom. I stared at that last sentence for a long time. It wasn't an apology, but it was something something more than I'd ever expected. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into the back of an old book, Quiet Resistance, and knew, without needing to say it aloud, that this was a moment of letting go. The year had closed in a way that I hadn't imagined, with nothing more than the soft hum of my heater in the background and a feeling that was finally free of expectation. I had forgiven them, not out loud, but in the quietest of ways, by choosing peace for myself. Christmas Eve arrived, wrapped in soft silence. And in that silence, I had found the warmth I had been seeking all along. The kind that didn't need anyone to come back or change. Just the kind that needed me to choose it. And next year? I might host. And this time, it will be for me. The end of one chapter is always the beginning of another. In my case, it was a story about choosing to leave behind the weight of the past, about finally living for myself. And in that, I had found something more precious than any apology or recognition. I had found my way home. Ready to start your own journey of peace and self-discovery? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Let's grow together.